Hello, my name is Veronika Jiříčková. I'm a policy officer in the Energy Efficiency Unit in DG Energy of the European Commission. And today I will guide you through the main provisions of the Energy Efficiency Directive recast, which focus on alleviation of energy poverty. So the Energy Efficiency Directive has been in force since 2012. It was amended in 2018 and completely revised in 2023. And it introduced for the first time specific provisions targeting alleviation of energy poverty through energy efficiency. This is because energy efficiency has been identified as the most effective solution to alleviate energy poverty, because it tackles the root causes of energy poverty. So if we look at an overview of the main points of the revision, with the Energy Efficiency Directive, we introduced for the first time an EU-wide definition of energy poverty. We also introduced a specific sub-target under Article 8, which is the article which sets the end-use energy savings obligation. And so now there is a requirement to achieve a share of the total required amount of energy savings among vulnerable groups. I will talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. And then we have a number of provisions which require member states to prioritize, protect, and empower vulnerable customers and people affected by energy poverty. So throughout the directive, we specify that there are 4 groups of beneficiaries of these provisions. These are people affected by energy poverty, vulnerable customers, people in low-income households, and people living in social housing. So starting with the energy poverty definition. The energy poverty definition recognizes that energy poverty is a distinct form of poverty. And it also, when you look at the definition, it recognizes the multi dimensional aspect of energy poverty. So the way we define energy poverty is a household's lack of access to essential energy services, which are caused by a combination of factors. And these factors include non-affordability, insufficient disposable income, high energy expenditure, and poor energy efficiency of homes. So whenever the combination of these factors arise, this is what distinguishes energy poverty from poverty in general. So I already mentioned that there are 4 target groups who are the beneficiaries of the prioritization when it comes to implementation of energy efficiency measures. So I will briefly describe how we define these 4 groups. First, people affected by energy poverty. So this is linked to the definition of energy poverty, and it refers to the relevant national context. So member states may adopt their own legal definition of energy poverty and energy poor households, but they should take into account the EU-wide definition of energy poverty. Then we have the second group. These are vulnerable customers. So the concept of vulnerable customer is set out already in the gas directive. And when member states define vulnerable customers, they may include criteria such as a share of energy expenditure of their disposable income, the energy efficiency of their home, or, for example, critical dependence on electrical equipment for health reasons. So you can see that there's quite a diversity of criteria. Then we have people in low-income households. There is no definition of this group in EU law, but the way low-income households are usually defined is those who have disposable income of 60% of the national median equivalent disposable income after social transfers. And then people living in social housing. Again, there is no definition in EU law, but it is usually understood as residential rental accommodation, which is provided at sub-market prices, targeted and allocated according to specific rules, and such as identified need or waiting lists. So these are the 4 target groups. And now we get to the provisions themselves. So I will very briefly mention Article 8, which is the energy savings obligation. So basically, member states need to achieve each year annual energy savings, which are calculated as a share of their annual final energy consumption. And what the Energy Efficiency Directive recast introduced is a stepwise increase in the annual cumulative energy savings. So as you can see, in 2024, it will be 1.3% of the annual final energy consumption. In 2026, 1.5%, and as of 2028, 1.9%. And within this share, which is required, there is what we call just transition subtarget, meaning that member states will have to achieve a share of the total amount of energy savings among vulnerable customers and energy poor. Now, how to define this share? So either member states can use their own indicators to define the share of people who are considered energy poor, which is notified in their national energy and climate plans, or Article 8 introduces 4 indicators, and then the arithmetic average of these 4 indicators is used to calculate the number of people who are considered at risk of energy poverty. So the first indicator is the share of people who are unable to keep their home adequately warm. The second indicator is the number of people who have arrears on utility bills. The third indicator is the total population living in a dwelling with a leaking roof, damp walls, floors or foundation, or rot in window frames or floor. And the fourth indicator is the at-risk of poverty rate, so meaning the share of population whose disposable income is 60% of median equivalized income after social transfer. And so what happens is once member states have decided whether they use their own indicators or these indicators, they calculate the share of people who are considered energy poor. And then this same share is the share of the annual end-use consumption reduction, which needs to be achieved among the vulnerable groups of the population. But when it comes to Article 8, there are quite strict rules on eligibility of measures which can be counted under Article 8. And that's why the EED recast introduces a new article, Article 24, which is specifically dedicated to measures to empower and protect those for vulnerable groups. And it's a much broader variety of measures. As I said, under Article 8, there are some strict rules on what can be, what is eligible. So we have this new article. So there's a number of requirements. The first one is a general requirement to empower and protect energy poor and vulnerable customers. Just a side note here, those vulnerable customers are not only final customers, so people who have a contract with the supplier, but also final users, meaning those, for example, who live in a rent and they don't have a direct contract with the energy supplier because it's their landlord. So it's a broad understanding of customers. So under Article 24, among those measures to target vulnerable groups, the idea is that when member states design energy efficiency improvement measures, that they should prioritize the implementation of the measures among the 4 vulnerable groups, because they are the ones often who are most impacted by some of the distributional impacts. So, for example, member states are asked to implement energy efficiency measures and related consumer protection and also information raising measures as a priority among vulnerable groups. Member states are also asked to implement energy efficiency measures to mitigate distributional effects of other policies. So, for example, if a member state is deciding to introduce carbon taxation measures for fossil fuel heating, then what is recommended is that first there is an introduction of subsidies for insulation or clean heating technologies, which would allow the vulnerable groups to benefit from these subsidies so that they can be prepared when the tax on fossil fuel heating system kicks in. There's also a requirement for member states to make best possible use of public funding, both at national and EU level, and carry out early forward-looking investments in energy efficiency. So again, here what we are asking is for member states, whenever there is funding available for it to be used primarily, for example, for renovations, which would be dedicated to the vulnerable groups. And what is recommended is, for example, that those subsidy schemes, that a share of them is limited and accessible only to the vulnerable groups. Also, what is important with subsidies is that they are available for the vulnerable groups prior to the renovation, for example, because often they do not have the means needed for the upfront investment costs. And last but not least, with Article 24, member states are asked to establish networks of experts, which would gather together experts from different fields, health, social, building expert, and many others. And the network of experts is tasked with providing the policymakers with, for example, the indicators which can be used for the national definition of energy poverty, or the design of the measures which would benefit the vulnerable groups. And there is a link with the upcoming Social Climate Fund. So under the Social Climate Fund regulation, there is a new fund called the Social Climate Fund. It will be used for two types of measures. First, temporary direct income support to household and transport users, and then structural investments which will reduce emissions in transport and buildings to reduce costs for vulnerable households. And so I've previously mentioned the requirement for member states to make best possible use of public funding. So this will also include the Social Climate Fund, which was established in relation to the extension of the EU ETS to buildings and transport. And I would also like to mention Article 22. This is an article which introduces provisions on information and awareness raising when it comes to energy efficiency improvement measures. And there is a novelty with the recast, where among the measures to raise awareness about available energy efficiency measures, member states will now need to create one-stop shops or similar mechanisms where final users, final customers, especially households or small and medium enterprises, can come and they can get technical, administrative, and financial advice and assistance when it comes to a number of energy efficiency improvement measures, including renovations or installation of clean heating technologies, etc. And there is a requirement that these one-stop shops need to provide specific services which target households who are affected by energy poverty, who often also live in worst performing buildings. So again, as you can see in the revised directive, there is a focus on always providing special services or special care for the people who are affected by energy poverty, because we know that often there are information asymmetries and it's much more difficult for them to get information or to get access to financing. So that's why there is this new addition when it comes to the one-stop shops. So I will conclude with providing some useful resources. So there is a link to the revised Energy Efficiency Directive itself, and also to two recommendations which the Commission adopted to help member states implement and transpose the new provisions. So there is one on Articles 21, 22, and 24, and also on Articles 8, 9, and 10. So I hope this was useful for you.